Fighting in Thailand inevitably means fighting more frequently, whether it's every fortnight, every week, or a recent blog post illustrated children in Thailand fighting every day, or even multiple times in one day. My thoughts on this is that can be practical for children because they still lack the body weight and the power to significantly damage their opponent. But if you apply that same principle to adults, that's a recipe for disaster, and I have seen coaches do that. The heavier the fighter, the more accumulated damage you're going to get between fights, and the more recovery is needed before you can get back in and fight competitively again. So you can't treat everybody the same. The principles of individualization apply as usual. Personally, my main criteria regarding fight frequency, other than adequate physical recovery between fights, is that a fighter's had a chance to improve between fights as well before they go back into competition again to test themselves further. So if a fighter's had a chance to improve and learn from the lessons of the last fight, then it's time to go back into the next one and test again. So you need to have worked the technical drills, the tactical drills, to work on any problems that you found in the last fight, that you also need to have improved any physical qualities that you needed to adapt before the next fight as well. Otherwise you're kind of wasting that opportunity to learn. It's more than just recognizing what you need to work on. You need time to actually work on it so that you go back in an improved state. It's a case of fighting to kind of get a shopping list of things to target to work on personally for you to make you a better fighter. But then you do need to go away and target your training to improve that. And if you haven't had a chance to do that before you get back in again, then it's a wasted opportunity. So my observation is, if a fight purse isn't your main motivation to fight and getting better is, then less frequent fighting is actually beneficial, assuming that your training is quality enough to move you forwards between fights rather than just going round in circles. So if your purpose is to improve, then you need time to do that. You need time to work on the skills, develop the practice. You need those thousands of repetitions to actually rewrite your motor patterns and relearn neural pathways if that's what you're trying to do with habits. And that simply won't happen just overnight. It's not like the Matrix in that you can just download this stuff instantaneous and it's done. It's something you need to go away, deliberately practice, craft it, reinforce new habits, and go out and test those habits under fatigue, under pressure in the ring. If you go back into the ring and repeat the same mistakes, you're actually reinforcing those habits and making them harder to unlearn. So making sure you're doing this deliberate practice between fights is important to move you forward as fast as possible. We've got to remember that in Thailand, the fight purse is a major motivation. So more fights, more money. And it's also true that more fights, more experience means better performance too. But it's true to a point. Learning to handle the psychology and the emotion of a fight is a learn by doing experience and skill. So you need to get in and do that. So early on in your career, I'd say, around 5 to 10 fights for most people. That's going to be valuable to rack those up and get that experience of learning how to handle your emotions and the peaks and troughs in your psychology as you approach a fight, and learning how to stabilize and manipulate that so that you perform the best in the ring. And that's an individual thing to you. So once you've had a sufficient number of fights, and once you continue to compete regularly enough that you don't get ring rusty, then you've got all that sorted. And then beyond that, then less frequent fighting and actually working on improving your physical performance in between fights is going to move you forwards the quickest. So beyond this accumulation of early fights and continuous maintenance to avoid the ring rust, it's more about quality rather than quantity from that point on, just like everything in your training. So rather than lots of opponents, it's about picking the right opponents to move you forwards. So it's a case of fight testing under pressure, expose the problem areas, make a shopping list of those, go away between fights, work on those, get some improvement in it, go back into the ring and retest again. Expose the new problems, or that you haven't drilled those issues under fatigue sufficiently, so you need to continue crafting on those to make them robust enough to last in a fight under fatigue, under stress. So confidence comes from knowing you're better than last time. And if you feel you're being sent in to repeat the same mistakes, that's not helpful. That's reinforcing bad habits. So we must remember that in Thailand, the coaching model is largely a learning by doing approach. And this can be highly effective in some instances, but not all of the time and not for everybody. In Thailand, there's a relative abundance of training time, so a trial and error method is more practical in that kind of setup. But outside of Thailand, most need to make better use of the limited time that they've got to target their training a bit more. So they're just two different methods of achieving the same thing. I use an analogy for training in Thailand that's like shooting a target with a machine gun. So you're spraying at the target to hit it, and that's effective. That will get the target. But there's also another method. You could be more like a sniper and pick your target and take that shot. So both of them get the job done. That's, no doubt about it. But one uses far more ammunition than the other. And by ammunition, I kind of mean in the analogy here that it's training time for us. So less time for us allows us to target the specific adaptations we're after, go after it, get that change, move on to the next thing and maintain it. Rather than kind of just blitzing and hitting everything and getting some improvement, but not necessarily squeezing the effort in to really boost up that specific area that we're after, laser guided in on that and get that done. Coaching science is an evolving art of its own. And it's all about creating the right training environment for fighters to develop. So that means providing the right stimulus, whether it's the method you're using, the intensity, the duration that you're going for, and creating the right environment too, so simulating competition conditions, so that you start to place those physical attributes in the psychological setting as well. And giving opportunities to learn by doing as well, but also interacting and correcting if you can see that a bad mistake is starting to become reinforced as a coach. And of course, learn by doing can happen in fights as well, but it's only if the fighter is actually able to adjust what they're doing on the fly and develop under those conditions. If they're not doing that and they're reinforcing that bad habit, that's when the learning by doing isn't working, and we need some interaction there just to get some modification to those habits, get some conscious, deliberate repetitions of something different because what they're doing isn't working, and then reinforcing that enough so it becomes a robust habit that will happen under pressure and fatigue in the ring. So we want a mixture of structured drills that will reinforce the habits that we're after, but then also open-ended drilling to actually test that with more of this varied stimulus under fatigue, under pressure, when it's more mixed and random, to see if those habits that we formed are robust enough. And we want to test those habits under fight simulation of various intensities and levels. And structured drills can be designed so that a fighter can explore their own solutions to problems too. And of course that can happen in fights as well. But when the answers don't come instinctively, that's when another approach needs to be used, and that way we can nudge that fighter beyond their sticking point. So use your fights to get your shopping list of things to work on, then look at that list and pick out the key 20%. So you've got that 80-20% rule that I've written about in the past. I'll post a link to it. But of your 100% things to do, 20% of them will be the key ones that actually affect probably the remaining 80%. So if you can get those game changers, that priority 20%, and go at those, work on those, craft them, and then get back in the ring and test again. But remember that confidence comes from knowing that you're better than you were last time. So don't sort of rush into fights unless you're just trying to build up that fight experience to get the psychology nailed so that you're prepared for fighting. To get better, make sure you're working constructively between fights, otherwise you're kind of wasting that opportunity.